I talked earlier today, or at least Bill Horan faxed me today about the situation down in Louisiana. He said the flooding is worse than Katrina. We were in Katrina and we saw some terrible things, but he says this is worse, and what's happening is there's something called West Nile virus. The mosquitoes will proliferate right after this hot weather comes on with all this with all this water. And the Red Cross says they haven't seen a natural disaster this catastrophic since Superstorm Sandy. So it's really serious.
Wow, horrible. Well, the death toll is still rising from this historic flood around Baton Rouge. As Charlene Aaron reports, the devastation is widespread, as Pat mentioned, with more than 40,000 homes hit hard by the disaster.
This is the devastation from Louisiana's historic flooding. Cleanup has begun as some homeowners and businesses return to find total destruction.
Speechless. Don't know where to start.
Waters are starting to recede in areas hardest hit, but flooding still widespread in some areas, with some who survived Hurricane Katrina 11 years ago saying this is far worse.
Everything that I had is gone. Everything. Everything.
It's like the end of your life, end of your world. You know, having to start over like that. But we worked so hard for it.
At a news conference, Governor John Bel Edwards said some 40,000 properties and counting have been damaged by the historic flooding, and well over 30,000 people have been rescued across the state.
Nobody is going to be forgotten. We're going to work around the clock, and we're going to do everything humanly possible to render aid.
CBN's Operation Blessing is on the scene, assisting residents affected by the flooding, many of their homes uninsured.
It is such a blessing to know that people care. Well, we're having to pull out all of the furniture, all the beds, everything is gone.
Operation Blessing is going to help Miss Maryland as well as many other families and residents that have been flooded and devastated by these floodwaters. Operation Blessing is going to link arms and help these residents in this community get back on their feet.
Operation Blessing, in partnership with local ministries like Healing Place Church in Denham Springs, has an urgent need for volunteers and funds to help families begin the first steps to recover. Meanwhile, forecasters predict even more rain for some areas of the state over the rest of the week. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Boy, I was there during Katrina, and I tell you, when you were right after Katrina, and to see what's happening in this part of Louisiana, it's unbelievable. Well, Operation Blessing needs as many hands as it can get for this massive relief effort. So if you're interested in volunteering, you go to their website, it's ob.org. If you want to help, you can't volunteer. You can donate to Operation Blessing. All gifts are tax deductible. Just call the number on the screen and tell the person that you want to help Operation Blessing in Louisiana. But right now, OB is sending in a truck that's got all kinds of supplies for building. We're feeding as many as 2,000 people a day, hot meals, and there are other relief efforts going on that we think is very important. Well, in other news, the Donald says, look, Paul Manafort, you're just a little too conservative for me, and I think it's time to shake up the campaign. John Jessup has more.
That's right, Pat. Big changes today for Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Trump has picked a new campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, a veteran GOP pollster, and he has a new campaign CEO, Stephen Bannon, who was executive chairman of Breitbart News. But the Republican nominee says he has no plans to change his style for the general election. He did, however, on Tuesday reach out to black voters, saying Democrats have taken advantage of them.
The Democratic Party has taken the votes of African Americans for granted. They've just assumed they'll get your support and done nothing in return for it. They've taken advantage of the African American citizen. And it's time to rebuild the inner cities of America.
Meanwhile, polls show Trump's methods so far don't appeal to a majority of Americans. Pat, Hillary Clinton leading nationally and in key battleground states.
Well, I've seen one poll today that indicated a race that's 2 points apart with Hillary ahead. But she has dumped well over $100 million in ads, and Trump hasn't spent anything. So if he begins to spend some money on advertising and gets his act together, 2 months could be an eternity in politics. And so these speeches that he's made, if he stays on target, I think the big thing, will you stay on the script? The job situation is horrible in America. People are looking for work and they're hurting. If he can address that need and say, I'm the man that's going to bring you jobs, he'll begin to move up in the polls. So far, it's all been against him, like he is a little, a loose cannon and he's not fit to be president. That was a scenario that has been orchestrated by the Democratic Party. He has played right into it. If he says, no, I'm going to get guys like Rudy Giuliani and others to give me advice, we're going to craft messages that will, look like mainstream, he's going to come out of it. But it's a tough slog right now. He's going way behind. But if they they do have some money, surely they can start doing some TV commercials. John?
Pat, turning overseas, Russia has once again launched airstrikes from Iran against terrorist targets in Syria. Russian jets took off for the second day in a row from a base southwest of the Iranian capital in Tehran. Russian defense authorities say their warplanes destroyed 2 terrorist command posts and 2 training camps. The move into Iran has big implications for the U.S. and the Middle East.
This marks the first time that Russia has based out of Iran and marks an escalation in terms of the fight in Syria, not necessarily militarily, but in terms of the Russian alignment with Iran in places like Syria. It's just hugely embarrassing for the Obama administration. I mean, it's as if the Russians are forcing President Obama to completely reverse track when the White House insists that they're not reversing track on Syria, that they still support the ouster of Bashar al-Assad.
Now, American officials say Washington was aware last year that Russia might fly warplanes out of Iran, but Moscow's decision to do so this week came as a surprise. Pat, back to you.
Can you imagine the president spent so much time trying to convince the American people that the Iranians were our buddies, and we had to sign a nuclear deal with them, which everybody thinks was flawed, but it was signed. And now the Russians are taking over. The Arab people don't have the strength to overcome Russia, nor do they have the strength to overcome the United States. There needs to be a strong counterbalance to Russia, or else they're going to take everything they can get. And Putin is in there ready to go. What does he want? He wants the oil. He wants control over the oil. He wants the control over the oil pipelines coming out of the Middle East. And if he gets control of that, he can raise the prices to suit himself, and it'll bring up the value of the Russian oil, which has been in a slump because the prices worldwide are down. He's like a chess man, and I don't know whether Obama plays Pokemon or he plays checkers or whatever he's playing, but he isn't playing the same game that Putin is. And Putin is, cleaning his clock. In every move, Putin is coming out ahead. That's what Trump's been saying. They're a lot smarter than we are. Well, they really aren't if we use the resources that we have, but we're not using them. So that's the situation. And we had the Russians out of the Middle East successfully. They were gone. The Egyptians kicked them out. Everybody said, all right, that's the end of it. Now, Putin has taken a major role in Syria, taking a major role. He's moving into Iran. He'll be dominant before long in Iraq, and he will be dominating the oil. The oil, that's the big deal. John?
Pat, this summer marks the 5th anniversary of the Syrian civil war. What began as an isolated protest against the Assad regime has left the country devastated and changed the world. As Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, its impact has been felt all the way from the Middle East to right here in the United States.
This drone footage of the Syrian city of Homs reveals the apocalyptic landscapes the Syrian civil war has created. Barely 5 years ago, Homs was once a thriving city, but now, like much of Syria today, it's either a wasteland or a battlefield. Recently, we talked with Jonathan Spire, Middle East analyst and journalist who reported from the front lines of the conflict, and in a recent article reflected on the human cost of the war.
I kind of wanted to take a step back and just really focus on that, on just the extent to which, you know, human beings inside Syria on all sides have suffered in the course of this war. You know, nearly 10 million people made homeless, almost half the population or pre-war population of Syria having left their homes, maybe 400,000 people dead. You know, the sheer magnitude of what's happening in Syria, you know, it's something that I think needs to get across.
While the world's media focused on the war at one time, much of their attention has turned elsewhere. Yet the brutal war goes on and on.
I think it's important to remember is that this war, you know, is nowhere close to finishing. We had, of course, the ceasefire coming in this year on February 27th. It held for a while, but it's now, you know, conclusively broken down, and fighting's taking place across the country once again.
The conflict produced a wave of refugees that is changing the face of Europe.
And that's causing enormous strain on European societies who are not necessarily well prepared to receive those newcomers, or who don't wish to receive those newcomers.
Spire believes the war is a wake-up call to the U.S.
Syria, I think, is kind of an example of what happens when America is not involved close on the ground, when America isn't kind of around with its allies to keep some semblance of order, to keep that security architecture in the region, to deter enemies, to make sure the bad guys stay out. Then what you get is you get things like the Syrian civil war.
He also believes the war helped give birth to ISIS.
Absolutely. Without the vacuum that opened up as a result of the Syrian civil war, it's very hard to imagine how that Islamic State in Iraq, that became the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, could have got itself back on its feet.
The war also provided an historic opportunity for Russian President Vladimir Putin to dramatically increase Russia's presence in the Middle East. As the war drags on with no end in sight, its impact will likely still be felt, not only in the region, but beyond as well. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. A notorious pro-jihad activist in the UK has been convicted for supporting ISIS. Anjem Choudhury has been a figurehead for radical Islam for years, pledging loyalty to the Islamic State and its leader. Although he swore he did not pose a physical threat to the West, authorities say they've linked him to the battlefields of Iraq and Syria.
He is extremely dangerous. The word he spreads goes out on Facebook, Twitter and social media, YouTube, and it effectively infects the minds of vulnerable young men who are looking for some new meaning.
CBN News has reported extensively on Choudhury for years and his desire to bring Islamic law to the Western world. Well, the Obama administration will give up U.S. control of the Internet on October 1st. The plan is to hand over web oversight to a broader online community. The new model puts the Internet in several hands instead of a single body. Some Republicans say giving away the Internet could endanger national security and allow for unwanted international intervention. The transition is the last step of a long fight by the Obama administration to relinquish the Internet's control. Well, what's better than baseball on a beautiful summer afternoon? Try baseball in the stands surrounded by families of faith. At the Denver home of the Colorado Rockies, the team recently celebrated its 12th annual Faith Day featuring Christian music artist David Crowder. CBN contributor Stephanie Riggs caught up with the band and the team.
Worship, baseball, a beautiful Colorado summer afternoon, and David Crowder at the mic, leading the way.
Here's my heart, oh. We have the best view, I think, as you're seeing, especially if you hit a song that has been really meaningful to somebody, you can kind of spot different folks in the crowd that are maybe a little more overt in their expressions. And when you hit that song that's like their song, and it's pretty special.
This is how the Colorado Rockies celebrate Faith Day. Faith comes from the top down for the Colorado Rockies, from ownership to coaches.
I just ask for forgiveness, that's it. Just ask him to be my savior and to, for him to be the captain of my ship instead of me. And to change my life, change my thinking, change my habits, and he did. It was amazing.
Players are encouraged to go to church, attend team Bible studies, and pray. For many major league players, like Nick Hudley, who catches for the Rockies, Faith Day is every day.
Like it says, iron sharpens iron. We try to hold each other accountable. Obviously, we're playing a really intense sport at the highest level, and there's grown men out there. Obviously, it isn't the boys' club down the street, but I think people in that locker room, a lot of people love Jesus, and there's a lot of people that aren't afraid to say it, which is awesome. And nobody's ashamed of the gospel, and I think that that really permeates throughout the clubhouse for sure.
If Jesus played baseball, what position would he play?
He'd be a catcher for sure.
Why is that?
Because you run the show.
Well, baseball is the setting for Faith Day. The real goal here isn't who wins the game, but winning souls for Christ by sharing the good news, worship, fellowship, and testimony.
To be able to tell them that Jesus loves you in your present tense right now. He doesn't love like your future self more than he loves you right this second. You haven't gone too far. Grace is big enough to cover anything that you're carrying.
The Rockies are not alone in making a stand for Christ. The Nationals, Braves, Reds, Astros, Cardinals, Dodgers, Twins, and Rangers all have similar faith days. In Denver, Stephanie Riggs, CBN News.
Pat, I like what the Colorado Rockies catcher had to say. Faith Day is every day, but looks like we missed our invitations.
I'm so thrilled. It really is nice. I'm so glad, and I congratulate the Rockies and other sports teams. You know, these sports figures are role models for so many young men, and to see them take this stand opens the floodgates of faith for young people. So congratulations to the Rockies. I wish you'd do a little bit better out there on the field or win a few.
They need Jesus as the catcher.
He's going to be the catcher. Okay.